My grandfather grew up in a world lit by kerosene. Think about that not as a historical fact, but consider it as a sensory experience. Put yourself back in time 110 years ago. His childhood home, the hallways, the kitchen, the bedroom where he slept were lit by flame. The edges of every room dissolved into shadow. When the sun went down, the world got smaller. And then, when he was young, they brought electricity to his town. Not to his house, to his town. There were lines going up on poles along the main road, and businesses got it first. You could walk through town at night and see this new kind of light coming through the windows, steady and clean and not flickering. But at home, it was still kerosene, that distinct burning smell that we now associate with an industrial accident. Then, just the smell of nighttime in every single home. In every home, still predominantly in the kind of creepy shadows. Well, he went off to college, and when he came home, I love this detail because he talked about it like other people talk about falling in love. When he came home one year, they had electricity in the house. His mother could flip a switch, and the room was bright. The whole room. The corners, the ceiling, everything. He said he felt it like the future had arrived when he was away. He died in the era of America Online, AOL. And what was really remarkable about all those last years is my grandfather, he was a chess player, a serious one. And for most of his life, chess meant sitting across from someone at a board. It meant the chess club, the park, the picnic table, the kitchen table. It was physical, it was social. And then in the last chapter of his life, he discovered he could play chess against a computer named Boris. And then, and this is the part that amazed him, against other people too. People he'd never met, people from other countries. He could sit in his living room and play a man in Moscow. The grandson of a man who grew up reading by kerosene was suddenly connected to the entire world through a telephone line and a beige plastic box. Think about that arc. One human life, from kerosene to AOL, from a world where the next town over felt far away to a world where you could reach Moscow from your armchair. Now, think about what my grandchildren are going to experience. My grandfather's great technological leap was a light switch. My grandchildren are going to grow up in a world where artificial intelligence writes essays, where cars drive themselves, where you can strap a headset to your face and you could stand on the surface of Mars. The distance between my grandfather's light switch and my grandchildren's world is, I don't even know how to measure it. It's not a gap, it's a canyon. And it happened in just a few generations. And I think about that speed, that dizzying, accelerating, relentless speed of change is doing something to us that we don't fully understand yet. It's creating a hunger, a craving for something that moves a little slower, for something that connects us not just to the future, but also to the past, for something that says, remember this? Remember when? We are starving for nostalgia. And I think wine might be the most powerful nostalgia machine ever invented. Because every bottle of wine has something printed on it that almost nothing else in our lives has anymore: a year. Let me talk about that speed for a minute, because I think it's important to name what's actually happening before we get into why nostalgia matters so much right now. So, there's a concept in technology called the doubling rate. Moore's law, the observation that computing power doubles roughly every 2 years, has been roughly accurate since the 1960s. But it's not just the computing power that's accelerating, it's everything. It's the rate of information production, the speed of cultural cycles, the turnover of what's relevant. So let's think about music. In the 1960s, my parents listened to the music of their era. They listened to the Beatles and the Stones and Motown, and that music really defined a generation. It had a really long tail. These songs, they stayed in the culture for decades. My parents could hear a Supreme song in 1985 and be transported instantly back to 1965. 20 years and the emotional connection, it was still live. And in the 1980s, when I got my glorious Fisher stereo system with the turntable, the double tape deck, and ready? The CD player, I did the same thing. I listened to the music of the 70s, Fleetwood Mac, Led Zeppelin, the Eagles, and I could feel what it did to people who lived through that era. I could vaguely remember being a child in the back seat of the station wagon as my mother drove me from errand to errand. Song comes on, and I wasn't just hearing music, I was somewhere else. Now I sit around and listen to music from the 80s or 90s or 2000s, and the same thing happens to me, but with vivid memories. For me, those songs are time machines. So, Sweet Child of Mine comes on, and I'm the passenger seat of my best friend's car in 1988. A Nirvana track plays, and I'm in my dorm room debating some philosopher's true message. But for my kids, for someone in their 20s, those songs are artifacts from another civilization. The gap between 1992 and 2026 is not just 34 years. It is a completely different world. The technology, the culture, the way people lived, it's as foreign to them as my grandfather's kerosene lamps are to me. And that's the thing about accelerating change. It doesn't just make the future come faster, it makes the past feel further away. The distance between decades is stretching. The 1990s feel much different from today than the 1960s felt from the 1980s. Each era is becoming more distinct, more isolated, and harder to reach. And I think that's why nostalgia has become such a powerful force. It's not just sentimentality, it's a response to vertigo. When the ground is moving this fast under your feet, you reach for something solid, something that anchors you to a specific time and place, something that says, this was real, I was there, this happened. We see it everywhere. The resurgence of vinyl records, sales have grown for 17 consecutive years. The obsession with reboots and sequels and legacy franchises, the way TikTok is full of teenagers discovering music from the 90s and treating it like archaeological finds. Nostalgia is not a niche emotion anymore, it is a cultural industry. It's a coping mechanism for a species that is changing faster than its psychology can process. So, here's where wine enters the conversation. And I want you to think about something you've probably never considered because it's so obvious that it's almost invisible. Every bottle of wine has a year on it. Think about what that means. You walk into a store, and there on the shelf is a bottle that says 2019, not approximately 2019, not in the style of 2019. The wine was grown, harvested, crushed, fermented, and bottled from grapes that ripened under the specific sun of that specific year. It is very truly, in a literal sense, a piece of 2019 captured in a glass. What else in your life carries a year like that? Like nothing. Your phone is designed to be obsolete in 2 years. Your car, it's a model year, but it's functionally identical to last year's and most of the time looks exactly the same too. Your clothes, they don't have a vintage unless you're shopping in a thrift store, which, by the way, is another nostalgia industry that's booming. Even music, as powerful as it is as a time machine, doesn't carry its year on the face the way that wine does. You have to know when a song came out. With wine, it's printed right on the bottle, it's unavoidable. And here's what's extraordinary about wine's relationship to time: the wine doesn't just come from that year, it tastes like that year. A 2019 Burgundy tastes different from a 2020 Burgundy, even though they come from the same vineyard, made by the same winemaker, with the same techniques. Because 2019 had different weather than 2020: more rain, less sun, a frost in April, a heat wave in August. The year, it's in the wine, not metaphorically, chemically, structurally, on your palate. That's why wine people talk about vintages with the specificity that other people reserve for historical events. Oh, 1982 Bordeaux is said with the reverence like the moon landing, or 2010 Barolo carries the weight of that summer we drove across the country. Vintages aren't just labels, they're timestamps. They're coordinates on the map for your life. I'll tell you what I mean. There's a bottle of wine in my collection. I won't say what it is because it actually doesn't matter. But what matters is the year. It's 2015. And when I look at that particular bottle, I don't think about the wine. I think about 2015. I think about where I was living and what I was working on and who I was spending time with. I also think about the dinner where I first tasted that wine and who else was at the table. The wine, it's a bookmark for my life. It marks a chapter. Someday I'll open it. And when I do, I'm not just going to be drinking wine, I'll be drinking 2015. I'll taste that year. And it will be a conversation, not just with the people at the table, but with the person I was when that bottle first entered my life. I don't know anything else that does that. Not with that specificity, not with that sensory power. So, music, it comes close. A song can transport you, but a song actually sounds the same every time you play it. A bottle of wine has been changing the entire time it's been waiting for you. It's been aging, evolving, becoming something different from what it was when you first put it away. So when you finally open it, you're not just revisiting the past, you're meeting it again, transformed by time, just like you've been. That's not nostalgia. That's something deeper. It's actually a conversation with time itself. And this is where I think that wine does something that nothing else in our culture does as well. It bridges generations. Think about the difficulty of that. My grandfather's world and my grandchildren's world are almost incomprehensibly different. The daily experience of being alive in 1940 and the daily experience of being alive in 2030 share almost nothing in common. The technology, the pace, the information environment, the social structures, it's all different. How do you connect those worlds? How do you build a bridge across that canyon? Sit down at a table and you open a bottle. So, I've been at dinners where someone opened a bottle of wine from the 1960s. And what happened in the room is something remarkable. The older people at that table started talking about 1960, whatever, in a way that was immediate, alive, and personal, not historical, like experiential. I was in college that year. Oh, that's the year we moved to California. And that was the summer that, and they just go off. And the younger people at the table are mesmerized, not because they care about the wine's tasty notes, because they were hearing about someone's life. The year on the bottle gave them permission to ask questions they might have never asked otherwise. What was that like? What was going on in the world? And most importantly, what were you doing? The wine was a key that unlocked a door between generations. It gave the past a physical presence at the table. You could see it and you could smell it and you can taste it. And that made the past feel real in a way that a story alone can't quite achieve. I think about this in terms of what's being lost. My grandchildren will grow up in a world of such rapid change that the idea of the way things used to be will feel almost meaningless. The past be swallowed by the speed of the present. But if they're sitting at a table and someone opens a bottle from 2025 and someone else at the table says, you know, 2025, that was the year that suddenly the past has a taste, it has a texture, it has a physical reality that cuts through the noise and the speed and the forgetting. Wine doesn't stop time, it stores it. And then years or decades later, it gives it back to you in a glass and you share it. That's the miracle. My grandfather and I, we never shared a bottle of wine. I wish we had. Because I think if he'd opened a bottle from the year they brought electricity to his house, if that bottle existed, if someone had put it away, and we taste it together, I would understand his life in a way that no story and no photograph and no home movie could ever give me. I would have tasted the year his world changed. And he would have seen in my eyes that it mattered, that I wanted to know. And that's what wine does at a table across generations. It makes the past drinkable. It makes the memory something you can share, not as information, but as an experience. So let me bring this back to where we are, to right now, to the year 2026. We are living through the fastest period of technological change in human history. The difference between today and 5 years ago is staggering. The distance between today and 5 years from now is unknowable. And that speed is producing a culture that is simultaneously obsessed with the new and desperate for the old. We scroll through AI generated content and then we put a vinyl record on because we want to touch something that's real. We FaceTime our friends across the world and then we crave sitting next to someone in dead silence. We have everything at our fingertips and it feels like we're losing everything that matters. Nostalgia, it's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the recognition that some things from the past are worth preserving, not as museum pieces, but as living practices. Sitting at the table, sharing a meal, opening a bottle, and letting the year on the label start a conversation that takes you somewhere you didn't expect to go. Every generation has its version of this. My parents, they had their music, and my grandfather, he had his chessboard. My grandchildren will have, yeah, I don't know what. But I also hope they will have a table and a bottle and the willingness to sit long enough to hear a story. Because here is what I've learned from wine and what I believe more deeply than almost anything that I know. Connection, it doesn't happen at the speed of technology. It happens at the speed of a meal, and the speed of that bottle being shared, at the speed of someone saying, you know, that year, and everyone at the table leaning in. The future, it's going to keep accelerating. I can't stop that. Nobody can. But wine, that moves at the speed of seasons. Takes a year to make. It takes years and sometimes decades to reach its potential. And when you finally open it, it asks you to slow down, to pay attention, to remember. And in a world moving at the speed of light, it's not quaint. That's essential. My grandfather, he went from kerosene to America Online. And I've gone from a landline to a supercomputer in my pocket. And my grandchildren will go from God knows where to God knows where. But a bottle from 2019, it's going to taste like 2019. It's going to carry that year inside it, the sun and the rain and the harvest and the world as it was. And when somebody opens it at a table in 2039 or 2049, it'll still do what wine has always done. It'll give people a reason to sit down, to slow down, and to remember. And that's the power of the year on the label. It's a thread connecting the past to the present to the person sitting across from you. In a world that's moving too fast to remember yesterday, wine, it remembers everything. So open something tonight, something with a year that means something to you, and tell somebody why. Because that's how the past stays alive. Not in museums, not in archives, and definitely not on your phone. At a table, in a glass, and a story that starts with a year.